Racism and bigotry have left a stain on America's history. It's been as blatant as the slave trade and Jim Crow laws in the South, to more subtle acts yet equally impactful in preventing some people of color from advancing in certain jobs, professions, even access to quality health care. In today's political climate, racial tensions are high, especially due to Virginia government officials being under fire for engaging in the mockery of African Americans by dressing up in derogatory and offensive costumes. We're recording this segment February 12, 2019, when this issue is very much in the headlines. Here with us today to give us some insight on how we can combat racism head-on is activist, artist, and ambassador Yewande Austin. She travels around the world teaching strategic diversity leadership, social responsibility, and youth development. Thank you so much for coming in here today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Your organization is called the Global Institute for Diversity and Change. What exactly is it?
So we're a capacity building consultancy. What that means is that we produce a range of programs that teach our clients how to create safer, more inclusive, and equitable spaces, from professional workspaces to the spaces in which we learn and the communities in which we live.
We are having this conversation here in Virginia. What is your first memory of racism in the Commonwealth?
As a woman of color, I think it's safe to say that I've experienced many forms of blatant racism and subtle racism virtually every day of my life, but none was scarier to me than when I moved to Virginia. I will never forget the day that I jumped off of that moving truck and was so excited. The Virginia Commonwealth University had brought me to become the very first diversity lecturer in residence in the Office of the Vice President for Health Sciences to teach pre-health and professional health science students how to integrate diversity into the practice of healthcare. I was so excited to be here. And in the museum district, nothing prepared me to greet my white neighbors to receive no response in return. Nothing but stares. Yeah. I remember in those moments feeling a sense of fear that I had never felt in the developing world and villages where I work, to the outer reaches of the United States. Never had I lived in fear, but their silence told me that I wasn't welcome. And for a moment I thought I had made a really big mistake moving to Virginia.
As a woman of color, do you use experiences like that one and others to fuel your passion to spread the word for the need for equality?
Certainly. Well, we're preparing to commemorate the 400-year since the first group of enslaved Africans were brought to the United States, and more specifically to Virginia. I think it's safe to say that we've made a lot of progress, but recent events have shown us that we have a long way to go. It's not entirely our fault. Scientists say that there's a default mechanism in us as human beings that's designed to reject anything that is different than us. But what I have learned through my work is that education is key to teach people how their biases can be very destructive. And so I take that on as a deep responsibility.
And you do educate the community. You teach something called REAL. Tell us what that is.
I do. So racism is a very complex issue. Johann Blumenbach knew exactly what he was doing when he created the concept of race, which was designed to divide and oppress communities. And so I address it in the phrase REAL. R, standing for representation. So critical that we have representation of diverse populations that represent our community in places where we govern, teach, educate, and provide health care. E for education. Many people grow up in environments where they simply don't understand there are biases that have developed because of the spaces in which they grew up, as well as reinforced by media. A is for accountability. We've got to have accountability measures in place to hold our leadership responsibility. And L is for love. Very often we underestimate the power of love and how if we just treat another fellow human being the way we would want to be treated, we could eliminate a lot of this behavior.
For people who say racism doesn't exist here in our communities, what is your response to that as far as that it does?
Yeah. Sadly, racism permeates through every segment of society. We see it in healthcare, where African American women are the largest population of marginalized patients within healthcare. We see it in education, where in the state of Virginia, less than 40% of all children under the age of 10 are literate. There is no question that racism is affecting us in small and major ways. But what we have to do is we have to look at the issue. And the issue is that racism is a disease, and education is an important part of that cure.
For people who aren't aware of blackface and really what the issue is, what is an action that would equate to that for a Caucasian, for folks to really realize how offensive that is and just how that can tear you apart?
Yeah. Amy, there is no equitable representation for what blackface would be for the white community. There is none. Blackface is a systemic tool that was used to reinforce negative stereotypes about people of color, stereotypes that made us seem as if we were ignorant, as we were less valuable, that we were violent. And when you reinforce those ideas about a community, it spreads like a disease. So what we have to do as a community is not go to that quick solution like a Band-Aid, like impeachment, but really develop a cure.
Can communities heal from these types of events?
We certainly can, and I think we've seen enormous progress in just the past year. Over 100 women of all backgrounds are now in positions of government that weren't a year or even 2 years ago. So that's a sign of progress, and I think it's showing the younger generation that although we still have a long way to go, they are now empowered because they see representation that gives them an idea that I can do that. I can make a difference, my voice matters, and it needs to be heard in the highest levels of government and positions of power.
Yewande Austin, thank you for sharing your ideas with us, adding to our conversation here in Virginia.
Thank you.
For more information about Yewande's work and the organization Global Institute for Diversity and Change, visit globalinstituteforchange.com.